Welcome to Two on One, a weekly talk show hosted by two theologians as we talk about the intersections of theology and pop culture. I'm the Reverend Arthur Stewart, one of your co-hosts.
I'm the Reverend Stephanie Kendall, your other co-host, and welcome. We're so glad that you have all survived the snowy week. If you were in a place where it snowed, or
It is snowing right
just,
now.
just the week writ large. You
Right.
made it. You made it to Wednesday.
Congratulations. So, yeah, can we talk about Valentine's Day is coming up and then Ash Wednesday? And, are you ready for Lent?
Vaguely.
Vaguely. Okay.
I'm vaguely ready for Lent only because I've been putting together what we are calling Bloom bags because I do a curriculum every year, and this year's curriculum is called Bloom.
Okay.
And so our Bloom bags kind of are little trinkets and tools for every time between Ash Wednesday and Easter. So there's like your little ashes and in them, and then there's a journal. I'm for those of you in my congregation that have not received your Bloom bags yet, be wary that I'm about to tell you what's in them. There's a journal that asks you for a writing prompt for all of Lent, and then there's a palm cross for Palm Sunday. There is a washcloth for Maundy, Thursday, and we're going to do a hand washing ritual for all of us.
I just finished writing a hand washing ritual for Maundy, Thursday because we're doing send home kits in part because of you talking about it.
Yay! So, anyways, I've been thinking a lot about it, as we are wont to do. I've thought less about Valentine's Day. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, that's the holiday my husband and I agree to skip.
Well, if
I'm,
any of our people out there know of any single men,
I'm gonna send you something for Valentine's Day. It won't get there in time, but I'm gonna do it.
You can be my Valentine.
Yeah, I want you to be my Valentine. It's gonna be like a Power Rangers Valentine.
I love
it. You're the saber-toothed tiger of my heart, Spiff. So, our we're doing this Mark Maron opening. I sent you a promo for our lead sponsor, and it is still and continues to be, and we're so thankful for that, Jeff One-Row Designs. They're now celebrating 16 years of making ordinary time extraordinary. And I just read your line in that. Sorry.
I love that. That's okay. We'll switch off because you know what? Why not?
We're fluid.
And I love that it's 16 years. I love that we are continuing to count the years with Jeff One-Row and his creative team at Jeff One-Row Designs, who have been creating handcrafting liturgical textiles. Their processional banners and seasonal banners grace sanctuaries across the country. Their frontals and paraments adorn altars and lecterns in churches of all sizes.
And clergy love their pastor stoles, deacon stoles, chasubles, copes, and other vestments.
I hear that. You have a couple of them.
I do. I own 3 stoles made by Jeff One-Row Designs. All of them are from the Origami Crane stole line. Each matches the other in terms of quality, of material, intentionality of crafting, and pattern while still having individual character. I've used them at city council meetings, marching in pride, 3 weddings for people of varying genders, and during Eastertide. Stoles from Jeff One-Row Designs are a liturgical utility tool.
And Jeff One-Row Designs is proud to include Episcopalians and Presbyterians, Methodists, ELCA, Lutherans, United Church of Christ, Disciples of Christ, Unitarians, and Roman Catholic, faithful among their clients, interfaith and non-denominational clergy love their inclusive designs as well.
So whether you're shopping for the smallest altar accessory or reevaluating your entire collection of vestments and paraments, Jeff One-Row Designs would be honored to work with you to create something perfect for you.
That is true. And so you can all visit Jeff One-Row, JEFFWUNROW.com for a catalog of stoles, vestments, paraments, banners, anything that you can think of. Jeff and his entire team are going to be honored to work with you. And just know that our viewers and listeners have a special promo code. And this is a true story. True story. I had 2 clergy last week text me and say, what is the 2-on-1 code? Because people are thinking about not only Easter coming up, because as we were just talking about, Lent starts next week, which means Ash Wednesday, which means that Easter is, 44 days after that. And ordinations are coming up that a lot of our friends and people that have come behind us, our siblings in the ordained ministry, will be having their ordinations come up all throughout the year. And so 2 people I know are getting Jeff One Rose Stoles with the code 2on1, all
Yeah,
one word.
how could they not know the code if they ask what the 2-on-1 code is? The 2-on-1 code is
It's
2-on-1.
2on1. I know. I think it's because, and so we'll tell our viewers this right now, you have to go to the very end. It's at checkout that you have to put it in there. So I think it was a little bit, they were like, they hadn't gotten there yet. And so go all the way to the end. Don't I don't know that you can do this. I tried. If you are trying to like Apple Pay and things like that, you got to go all the way to the end. Make sure that you type in the code 2on1, all one word, for 15% off, not just your one stole, but your entire stole order.
That's fantastic.
We are thankful to Jeff and his entire team for continuously sponsoring 2on1 and being our lead sponsor during this time.
Absolutely. Should we bring in our guest?
I like him, so I think we should.
Are you ready for some Plunkett? I'm happy to welcome and of course, the Reverend Jamie Plunkett.
Are you ready for some Plunkett to the tune of Are You Ready for Some Football? Might be my new favorite.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to change my name. That's what I'm going to do.
Okay. Hi, Jamie.
Hello.
Hey, buddy.
How are you?
Arthur Williams Jr. I love that. Well, are you ready for some football? Mm-hmm. Are you ready to party? Are we going to get DMCA'd if I keep singing?
I hope not.
So let's not.
No.
Okay.
So, Jamie, you are here to talk to us about the Super Bowl. Super Bowl number something or other, 55?
LV.
LV, 55.
Mm-hmm.
Which took place this past weekend, where the Kansas City Chiefs showed that you do, in fact, need an offensive line to play football well.
Some might say that their offensive line was offensive.
Some might say that.
So anyways, Jamie's been our guest. We're going to get somebody who didn't make that joke, and we'll see you next week. This has been Arthur Stewart. We're sponsored by Jeff One Road Designs. I'm sorry, I'm just thrown off by the dad joke. Spiff?
Why would you be?
I'm here for it. Jamie, we all know each other well for transparency and all of this. You were, we like to stay current on pop culture. I don't know if you know, this is a pop culture podcast and talk show. And so Super Bowl as being, a huge pop culture event in our team. We were and you are a football person, I believe, if that is how you identify, as a football fan, if you will.
I do enjoy watching football happen, yes.
So talk to us a little bit about your relationship to football writ large and your experience with this particular game.
Sure. I grew up in the state of Texas, which, as most folks know, is a big football state. I never played it. I was not allowed to play football by my parents because I was very frail. I was a very thin human being growing up, and my mother was afraid that I would get snapped in half if I tried to play football. So I didn't ever actually get to play. A lot of my friends did. I grew up just loving the sport, loving how complicated it can be, how complex you can be with play design, and how you stop those plays that are on offense and all this kind of stuff. I went to TCU for undergrad and graduate school, so obviously I love TCU football as well. Go Frogs. Gary Patterson is my idol. Not really, but I do love him. So yeah, I obviously as a side hobby outside of ministry, I cover TCU football for frogsofwar.com.
Are you verified as frogsofwar.com?
Frogs of War recently got verified on Twitter, which was a very cool thing.
That is very cool.
It was kind of neat to take that Twitter account and that website over when it had like less than 400 followers, and now we're up to almost 14,000 and verified on Twitter. So that's kind of neat.
But you've made the entirety of the population of Western Virginia just furious.
So upset. That's almost a 5-year-old joke now.
Wow, and it's going to kindergarten.
It's going to kindergarten soon, and every year for the West Virginia game, people still bring it up, and West Virginians are still upset.
You want to loop people in on what this joke is, and no?
So TCU and West Virginia obviously play every year, being members of the Big 12 Conference. And in 2016, Game Day was coming to Fort Worth, which is ESPN's big weekend show that covers college football. They travel to a campus every week, and they were coming.
Does the guy put a head on? Is that right?
Yeah, Lee Corso puts the mascot head on to help pick the winner of that big game. And that was TCU West Virginia. And so one of our editors on the site had seen a screenshot of a former West Virginia football player who played for the Philadelphia Eagles at the time. His name was Rasul Douglas, and like the little cryon on the
Chiron.
screen for his game, Chiron, sorry, said Rasul Douglas, Western Virginia University. And so he sent that screenshot to all of us and said, this is 2 weeks before TCU's game. We have to call them Western Virginia all week. And so we didn't have a game the week before. So for 2 straight weeks, we're previewing the West Virginia game, exclusively calling them Western Virginia. And everyone thinks, most people understood that it was a bit, but there was a large swath of West Virginia fans and just West Virginians in general who were very upset that we were referring to them as Western Virginia. I was told quite a few times that I needed to take a geography class. I was told that West Virginia became its own state in, I believe, 1863, and that I was being very disrespectful to the state of West Virginia. They couldn't believe that someone who was running a sports blog didn't know geography. I got hundreds.
Mansplaining in there.
I got hundreds of emails.
So you now know what it's like to be a woman with an opinion.
It's true. It's true. I have that that under my belt now, fortunately. But anywho, so that was where the joke started. People made Western Virginia signs for game day that year that got on TV. And so that's still kind of a rolling bit that we do at Frogs of War.
That's awesome.
I love that. Pertinent to this conversation, I just want to name that our good friend Whitney Waller-Cole also just said everyone's hair looks great today. So
thank you, Whitney.
Shout out to Whitney Waller-Cole. We appreciate you.
I'm letting my hair grow out into haircut I wish I had in the 90s. So okay. I got like this.
Got like a Zach Morris vibe, right?
I've got like an Eric Matthews thing going on. That's what I'm going for. Early season of Boy Meets World. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So the Super Bowl, right? The Patriots with Tom Brady, the winningest quarterback of all time, who nobody likes except for Corey Glover, and then on the other side are the Kansas City Chiefs, America's team with a really unfortunate name. It's not
unfortunate. It's racist.
It's racist. It's a racist name. The Chiefs are led by Patrick Mahomes, who they were talking and they were like, he hasn't lost by double digits since he was at Texas Tech, which is an incredible stat. But also he was at Texas Tech 2 years ago, 3 years ago,
4 years ago. I just want to take a moment.
Sure.
Yeah.
And take a little side note and just remind people who are watching that the Arizona Cardinals head coach Cliff Kingsbury has had at his disposal Baker Mayfield, Patrick Mahomes, and Kyler Murray, and has never, with any of those quarterbacks, won more than 7 games in a single season.
Do you know why?
Shout out to Cliff Kingsbury for falling forward and failing up in life. Good for him.
They were cursed when they left St. Louis.
It's true. It's true. But as far as Tom Brady goes, he was not playing for the New England Patriots this year. He was playing for the Tampa Bay
Buccaneers. I said the Patriots. I beg your pardon.
No, but I do know the difference. $30 million this year to come to not be in New England anymore, and who would say no to that? Really, frankly. So yeah, Tampa Bay against Kansas City, and it was the first game ever where a team was playing in their home stadium for the Super Bowl, which I thought was really cool. Obviously, with the game happening in Tampa Bay, Tom Brady signing there in the offseason made that a really interesting storyline as well.
I heard a rumor though that they're trying to
make this same joke. I know.
They're trying to make sure that a team never has a home field advantage again, so they're just going to have the Super Bowl in Dallas every year from now on. Is that true?
I saw that coming. I was mentally
prepared. Most of us had that joke just teed up.
I'm sorry, Spiff. I should have deferred.
Okay.
I am about 6 seconds away from changing my Twitter profile to just say consistently, spiritually, and emotionally abused by the Dallas Cowboys. It's into perpetuity at this point. Yeah, so it was a really cool storyline to have Tom Brady in a new place with a team that had all these pieces around him that seemed like they were going to be set up for success. Obviously, moving from the AFC to the NFC, where you had great quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers, you had Drew Brees, you had a lot of really great talent.
Is Kurt Warner still a thing?
No.
Okay. Has he been for 10 years?
Sweetie, no.
Okay.
No. No, but Kurt Warner, great story in and of himself, coming from Arena League football to take a team to the Super Bowl. That was pretty neat.
I have a question for you, Jamie. So
yeah.
I'm just gonna name for all of you watching out there. I'm a football. I think I've watched every Super Bowl. Me and
Wait,
football.
have you watched every Super Bowl, like from Super Bowl one, or
No,
every
I
Super
mean
Bowl
like
when you were a
I mean
child?
since like I was an I have so I will name that I have very vivid memories. I'm a Bay Area kid who grew up in the as a teen in the 90s and 80s and 90s, where San Francisco we had Joe Montana, Steve Young, Jerry Rice. Like these are names that I know very much. Though there's a funny story of one of our past guests, Catherine Wright, who was our Gilmore Girls person. Right before I went to seminary, my profile picture was a picture of me and Steve Young, because I went to an event in which I went to I think it was the Gay Men's Chorus Gala in LA, and he was one of the he was there, and everyone else. So a member of NSYNC was also there. All the patrons of that event were like, Lance Bass, how cool, blah blah blah, all the thing, and I'm there being like, oh my god, it's Steve Young.
Like Lance Bass.
And I was the only person who was like, Steve Young was taking pictures of other people, like people were handing them the camera to be like, will you take our picture with like Lance Bass? And I was like, oh my gosh, it's Steve Young. Yeah. So I took a picture of myself and Steve Young, and then Catherine thought that was my boyfriend because it was just like a random picture of me and this dude who she did not know, which I still think is one of my favorite stories before she met me. So I know football and things like that, all the same. But I'm not as, my relationship with it is tenuous, and I'm not as familiar in all the things. But I want to ask, as someone who is football knowledgeable, about Tom Brady and Gronk, and how he brought Gronk out of retirement to play with him, because what does it have to tell us about knowing the gifts and strength of the people around us to be our best self?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that was a really interesting storyline too, because Gronk retired. I mean, so for those who know football, it was surprising to me to recognize this year that Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelce are the same age. Everyone thinks of Gronk as like this really old tight end who's been in the league for a million years. Travis Kelce, obviously one of the best tight ends in the league right now. Everyone sees him as a veteran, but maybe a little bit younger. They're the same age, and played against each other, obviously, in the Super Bowl this year. But Gronk's a really interesting story because of all the injuries that he suffered in New England and the physical need for a break. You saw him out of, in retirement, having lost a ton of weight, looking really healthy when he was speaking at some conferences about self-care and just physical therapy and all these other things, just really emphasizing how good he felt having lost all that weight and not just taking the physical beating that every year that it comes with the territory of football. But I also think that there is strength in friendship and relationship, that when someone who you trust and care for deeply asks you to do something that you're probably inclined to do. Tom Brady and Gronk obviously won several titles in New England. They know each other incredibly well. Tampa Bay had kind of a weak spot at tight end. Cameron Brate is decent. OJ Howard was decent when he was there. But they needed a tight end to go alongside Mike Evans and Antonio Brown and this great receiving core, decent running back core with Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. But I think it was helpful for Brady in that he was in a new space for the first time in his entire career, to have that familiar face, to have someone who you already trust and know and can kind of just hit the ground running with, to ask Gronkowski to come out of retirement and for Gronk to say yes, even though he's been talking for the last year about how great he feels not playing football anymore. Obviously, the millions of dollars and now another Super Bowl ring probably help with that a little bit. But yeah, I think it goes a long way to say that, people will do a lot for their friends or people that they consider to be family. It's, I think, one thing to sign $1 million contract and go win a Super Bowl with a friend, but to step out on a limb and put yourself at risk a little bit for the people that you know and love, I think is a significant thing.
Love hath no greater work than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends.
Yeah. It's interesting kind of, conflating that with football, right? It's a sport, it's an entertainment industry thing. But at the same time, you are putting yourself in physical harm's way pretty significantly when you're playing the sport.
Sure. And so it makes me think, like, at least in our tradition, all of us being ordained and disciple, that, like, we have a search and call process that those who are called to leadership, it's a congregational vote and understanding. It's not just a senior pastor picking and, dropping someone into positions, but, in the way that Brady kind of did in that way, and pushing that, saying we need Gronk in here. I need this kind of, he's got the gifts that I see that we are lacking. And so I guess, is there something to learn from that says, like, what's the value of saying, okay, no, Brady, we need you to work with the people that are here, use your gifts and talent as someone who is undeniably good at football. He and I don't agree on almost anything else, but, like, he's good at football. If y'all saw the SNL skit, the Does It Still Work? And it was like, Tom Brady, you still work. Like, you play football well, and that's what you are supposed to do. Like, you got problems elsewhere, but you play football well. That he utilized them to bring in someone that he knew he could perform well with, rather than kind of utilizing his gifts to mentor and bring up maybe the next generation or who were already there.
Yeah. So there's like we all know this, there's an inherent power imbalance in professional sports. Owners carry so much weight. Even with players unions, the owners are really in charge. The general managers and presidents are really in charge of the league and player personnel decisions and all this other kind of stuff. But we've seen in sports lately kind of a shift where superstar athletes have been having more and more of a voice in those kind of personnel decisions. LeBron has had that influence pretty much everywhere that he has gone in the NBA. At a local level, Dirk in Dallas had a similar voice when he was still playing. And with Brady, you bring a guy like Tom Brady in who has been to 9 Super Bowls and won 6 prior to this season. He has a higher Super Bowl win percentage for his career than LeBron James has free throw shooting percentage this year. Just to put that in, he is, as of right now, more likely to win a Super Bowl than LeBron James is to make a free throw in a game.
But not as much as Serena Williams is to actually go as far in tennis. So just
true. Yes, right. So but we talk about,
we're talking about GOATs. I want to just name.
Yeah. No, that was just to emphasize that one thing. Obviously, Serena is top 3 greatest athletes of all time, hands down. She won a title while she was pregnant.
Wait, Pete Rose, Serena Williams, and who else, Jamie?
Gosh, you're really putting me on the spot here.
Pete Rose, Serena. Who's the third?
I would say
Meadowlark Lemon.
Tiger.
Okay.
Just from a titles perspective, Jack Nicklaus maybe. Anyways, back to what I was saying.
Yeah.
That we've started to see superstar players have more of a say, of a voice in player personnel decisions. And so it makes sense that the ownership and the leadership in the front office of Tampa Bay would listen when Tom Brady says, this is a guy we should probably look at picking up. You see down in Houston, the way that went incredibly wrong this year with the Texans, where the ownership said, yes, Deshaun Watson, superstar quarterback who we just signed to like $150 million deal, who is 26 years old, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. We want you to be a part of these other decisions that we're making about the front office and about player personnel. And then they exclude him from those conversations. And now he wants to leave. And I was asking for a trade, right? And he's saying, I'm not going to show back up in Houston anymore. Players are finding their power, I think, which is really important and valuable to an extent. Now, how much that trickles down to kind of the average NFL player versus a superstar is still yet to be seen. But I think people like things that Tom Brady and Deshaun Watson and some of these other superstar players are doing, LeBron in the NBA as well, those more kind of team sport scenarios, that's only going to benefit athletes more. I think, as they kind of reclaim some of that power, because truly, the owners wouldn't be billionaires without these athletes. And so, we could talk about 3 episodes of 2-on-1 about should college athletes get paid, because the answer is yes, at least in my opinion.
Sure.
Well,
When universities are making millions and millions
they
of
should be
dollars off of these
formally
kids.
paid. Yes.
But I think that there's an inherent power imbalance, and there's also a necessary trust that has to happen between the front office and its key players. And so if those two sides aren't listening to each other or communicating or feel comfortable enough expressing what they need, Brady coming in and saying, I need this guy, I need him here for us to be successful this year. If that's not, if they can't lay the groundwork for that, then they're not going to be a successful organization in the long run.
Well, and does that, and I'm interested in this. Sorry, Arthur, I don't want to cut you off if you have a question, but is there, what does that have to teach the church? I guess is part of, is there an inherent understanding of, is football has a goal that is tangible and recognizable, and everyone is trying to go and win the Super Bowl, right? Like game 1, practice 1, draft, right? We're going back to whatever it looks like. The vision casting for a football team is, how do we gather the right people to accomplish this particular task? And I think we at 2-on-1 every week, and Arthur brings this up actually most often, of like, we lack vision in the church in a way that's like really kind of apparent, right? We don't have the Super Bowl that we are all trying to get to, or do we, right? Is salvation or whatever that looks like for you, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. Like, do we lack that kind of vision to say, we need the right players, which is everyone, I don't know. But so is there something to learn for the church in that space?
Are you ready for baptism?
Yes.
Yeah, I do think so. I think, I think that a lot of individual congregations all find themselves at this point where the lay folk are saying, we pay the ministers to do this. And then the clergy team is saying, yes, and you also pay us to gather us all together for what God is calling us to do. So the way that I had it, the way that I use these and can relate football to it is, think of kind of an offensive staff and the offensive players. Who's in your huddle? Who's calling the plays? And then how do you execute the play once it's called? If it's only the offensive coordinators and the coaching staff that's huddling up and then running the play, they're not going to be successful. If it's only the players that are designing and recruiting and doing all of this other stuff, they're probably not going to be as successful, because they're taking time away from actually practicing and all the physical nature of the game, right? It takes the entire team, coaching staff on down, to the last practice squad player to make this thing successful. That's why church is a community sport. Is if we're missing pieces, if we don't have our offensive line, as we saw with Kansas City, if we're missing a tight end, as we saw with Tampa Bay before this year, the plays aren't going to be as successful as they could be.
It's a body of Christ metaphor for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and my newsletter article was, do you think tight ends aren't important? No, I wanted, so let's jump back to like the recruiting Gronk metaphor for a second, right?
Yeah.
I think congregational call is important. I think it's absolutely, like, we're all disciples because we are, not because like by default. And I understand and celebrate the importance of call. Also, churches that lack vision, I wish they would make more room for specialists to come in. It's and I'm not saying my congregation lacks vision. We're working on it. We're recasting it, or however the case may be. But right now we have hired on an adjunct minister who is, by terms of her employment, not called. But that's because she's specializing in 3 very specific fields. And it's amazing because people are like, oh, but she's also the substitute minister. It's like, no, first of all, that's a bad term. And secondly, no, she's not the associate. It's adjunct. It's brought in for a particular purpose at a particular time. Churches are afraid to do that. Like I'm assuming Gronk said, you can have me for 1, maybe 2 seasons and I'm out. Or
I think he signed a 2-year deal.
Yeah, I think he did
a 2-year deal. And that's enough time to figure stuff out and set things in motion and get going. It's, and the Super Bowl thing, having any sort of goal we don't think we should have numerical goals. Can you imagine what would happen if a church said, what we're going to do is we're going to work towards 500 baptisms in the next 2 years?
Hmm.
And of course, salvation can't be quantified, but also to be able to say, like, what we want to do is make an impact and spread the word and become present in our neighborhood and preach the good news. And we think we can do that, and a way to quantify it. Secondly, and excuse me, I'm just talking way too much, I feel like. Churches can't make qualitative goals either because they feel like that, for some odd reason, to say, our goal is to seek and save the lost, right? And we define lost as this, and we define save as this, and we define seek as that. The Protestant mainline is scared to do that, and that's why they're not making it to the playoffs, so to speak. Okay, but my question is, do churches get bye weeks?
No.
No? You're sure? Not
No.
even when the youth minister preaches?
No Sundays off, man. You never know who's coming through that door. You never know who's going to be impacted by the words that are being spoken. You never know who the Spirit is going to touch that day.
Yep.
And that's not just on Sundays. That's every day of the week, right? This is why ministry is so difficult and so taxing and so draining, is because you never know. I just recorded a virtual Sunday school talking about Jesus on his way to heal Jairus's daughter, and he's touched by the hemorrhaging woman. You never know when someone is going to desperately need you in that moment. And so you can't take a Sunday off. Not that we're Jesus, we're not Jesus, but the interrupting kind of nature of ministry is that we kind of always have to be on our toes because we never know what's coming next.
So can we talk about the Chiefs for a second? I'm sorry, Spiff.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Let's talk about the Chiefs.
So the Chiefs had a failure to launch, essentially.
Yeah.
No offensive line. Mahomes would get the ball and he would have to start scrambling like immediately. There was this marvelous little Instagram thing where like Mahomes is like, and he's dodging all sorts of people trying to tackle him, and he throws the ball and it successfully hits a guy in the head.
That's the metaphor for so many things in church.
Yes.
So they, like, the fourth quarter, I will admit I stopped watching the game because it became literally impossible for the gap to be closed. I stopped watching at like 3 minutes and 30 seconds left on the clock because it could not physically happen that they could tie the game.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do for congregations? How do we say to parts of the church that have done a really good job, it's time to finish out the quarter and the game's over this time? Like how do we bless the end of ministries for folk? And I think the Chiefs will be back. I think the Chiefs will be a contending team for years and years and years. Do you know what I mean? How do we say to some, not you're going to try to get to the Super Bowl next year, but maybe it's time for your franchise to go? No, yeah. That sounds wrong. That makes I think you understand my question, but I'm not phrasing it well.
You know, I think that every metaphor has its breaking point, right? And I think congregations trying to make the Super Bowl kind of might be the breaking point for this metaphor, simply because only 2 teams ever make it. But there can be successful seasons without a Super Bowl title. You know, it just depends on where the franchise began that year, right? Like nobody thought the New York Jets were going to win the Super Bowl this year. But had they, you know, by some surprise made the playoffs, everyone would have considered that a successful season. And so I wonder if for our congregations, let's dream according to our gifts and skills, right? Let's make sure that we're in tune with who we are, who God created and called us to be in these moments. And then we can go out and we can do beautiful, meaningful work that moves people towards healing and wholeness. We can have a huge impact on our little corner of the world. It doesn't have to be Super Bowl worthy to be worthwhile.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, I think oftentimes churches get caught up in like the biggest possible thing that we could do that's going to impact, right? Like 500 baptisms. What if we just started with 5?
Well, and
what if we just started with not making every single event that we do the first annual event, right? What if we can just do one thing really well and then do the next thing really well?
That is my biggest pet peeve. Like my biggest it's a pet peeve. First annual, it's not. It's either first or it's annual. It literally cannot be both.
Right.
Sorry. No. I didn't know you were saying that as like first annual. Like I'm not criticizing you, Jamie. I just
Well, it's kind of the running joke though with churches, right? Is like, oh, we did this event really well, we're going to do it again next year for sure. We don't necessarily, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case.
Well, Dan Livers, I'm watching we have some conversation happening online. It says, Dan says, I think it's a worthwhile question about how congregations measure success. Is it about championships and attendance? Like, what does that look like? And I think the three of us have even had this conversation, but let's have it live for people. Who gets invited to the big senior ministers conference or things like that, right? Like, what does that do? What does that say? Is is that an aspirational goal? Is it just a support network of, ministry happening on that level, but not, are we leveling different types of ministries? Like, what is the impact that we are trying to gauge in our churches? If a church of 5 people, has active ministry and is engaged in their community, or the where 2 or 3 are gathered, is that the church that we're really trying to plant in people's homes and people's lives and whatever, or do we want to be a mega church, right? Because it looks like more numbers, more people, more money, and more money affects more people and change. What is the qualifier that we are aiming for? And I think the answer is a right-sized relationship to the communities that you are serving. And on top of that, systemically changing the vision of what it means to be a big or effective congregation. That not everyone is meant to be, 3,000 people.
Yeah, I think
a question, I don't know, but
yeah, just kind of my initial kind of thoughts in response to that are, growth is good, right? Like we all celebrate growth in the church, but I think there can only be one biggest church at a time. That's how math works. There can only be one biggest budget at a time. And I think just like with Super Bowls, we focus on the big dream and we put that before the reasonable holy work that's right in front of us.
Yeah.
A congregation of 30 people can have a tremendous impact on their community. And that's worthwhile, and that's good, and that is holy. And that should not be overlooked because the flagship church over here is doing something that's like $2 million worth of work, right? I think a lot of times congregations get caught up in that conversation because we as people just kind of naturally gravitate towards the bigger story, towards the larger impact. And that forces churches to have those conversations that they might be better off just not having. And focusing on, let's set reasonable goals, reasonable markers for success for us. And then at the end of the day, we can sit there and, well done, good and faithful servant.
And forgive me, I'll tell you all when we're done recording what that was. I was able to listen. So I promise you that at Park Avenue in New York City and University in Fort Worth and Riverside in Wichita, there are 3 very distinct ministries that are happening, right? And size and program and everything else. The university model would not be sustainable or smart in Wichita. Mm-hmm. Although I would love to be like, guys, we're going to expand our staff to 18 people. My question is always like my sanctuary seats 400, I think, if everybody's like front to butts. And I mean, right now
that's how we describe
front to butts.
That's actually a chapter title in my auto, but never mind. But it seats 400 people, but it also and I guess our education building works or anything else, but that's it. And we can't have 500 people in worship. I mean, we could have 2 services, but it's, we don't have the parking, we don't have the space. We're a neighborhood church on purpose. And with purpose then in that neighborhood. And I think that's exactly what you were saying, Jamie. I wanted to reaffirm that.
Well, and that, I mean, I think that goes to, so you hold 400, Jamie, how much you guys hold thousands, right? I mean,
our sanctuary, at its fullest, our sanctuary can hold about 12 or 1,300. Yeah.
Right. And mine holds 270 front to butts. Mine holds 270.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? And so what does impactful ministry look like is very different when we take away those numbers, right? because we can all have 40 people in our congregations and it's going to look very different as well, optically, and the work that we're called to do, and who are those 40 people and things like that. Part of it, I think, is again figuring out, what is effective, and what are we called to do, right sizing the relationship to who we are in the moment, and addressing it in that space. And I think, okay, we're going to get a lot of front to butt comments, I think, later, but
really are. You might just need to make
that goes up there with the hard meat conversations. I think that this is, I don't know, I think it's a helpful conversation because we continue to figure out how do we affirm, good ministries, right? People are like, this ministry only has 3 people in it, we got to cut it.
Well, and my question too is like, there can be a church with 150 people in it, and it can be wildly unhealthy. It can be a franchise that's like not a franchise, Jesus, excuse me, and literally Jesus, excuse me. It can be I suppose. I'm sorry, Spiff. I cut you off first, and please finish.
No, go ahead.
Excuse me.
No, I was bringing it back a little bit to, do we put emphasis on personality, right? Like, because here's the other part about like Gronk, let's say, right? I couldn't have told you what Gronk's at, but I can tell you I know Gronk likes to party. Like his reputation precedes him, and there are many of us in ministry in which that is true and fair also, that our reputations precede us in lots of different spaces. And so like, how does that either adversely and or help, the ministries that we are called to do, in the way that like, more people are going to watch watch Tampa Bay now that you've got that, kind of dynamic duo of Gronk and Brady back together and doing the thing. And, oh, Gronk's a loose cannon. He's fun to watch because he's a little bit out there. But it's also volatile in a lot of different ways as well. So, what does the church, when you're like, let's bring in that big preacher, but that big preacher is probably, if they're doing, let's say, justice work and your congregation is not there yet, in that realm of justice work, you're about to disrupt a whole lot of everything. And is that good and faithful work?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. The thing that comes to mind for me as you were talking about reputations is, Francis Chan. I think we all probably kind of know who Francis Chan is. Christian writer, church leader out in California. Don't necessarily agree with him theologically, but one of the things that I think he did well was when his congregation was growing and growing and growing and growing, he started to recognize that people were coming to church to see him, not to experience God. And so he walked away from the congregation. And I think it takes a tremendous amount of something to recognize that and to make that kind of move, because I think for a lot of ministers and for a lot of clergy, we heap so much pressure on ourselves to have growth and to do good work and to make sure that everyone's feeling connected and fed and whatever else, that it can be hard to walk away from something like that, even when it might be time. And moving into something new can be difficult because of where we've been and the things that we've done in the past. Like that idea of starting over or building something again, knowing how much it took the first time around. There's a lot to unpack, I think, in what you just said, Spiff. I don't know that we necessarily have time for it all.
Well, and I think too, like with, for example, dear Mr. Mahomes, second year in the pros, not second year in the pros, excuse me, second year at Kansas City, second time taking them to the Super Bowl, did his absolute damnedest. And I just have to point out, at one point he threw horizontal to the ground and he hit the receiver in the face, but he hit the receiver. Like he was making there were two different games happening. And what I liked is watching sports Twitter, which I didn't know it's a thing, but it is. There's not just.
So you don't follow Jamie online?
There's just.
I am sports Twitter.
Sports Twitter.
I may mute you a few months out of the year.
You're probably not the only one.
Well,
and that's okay.
Just you wait for gardening season, sir. And But with Mahomes too, what I watched on sports Twitter is people were like, "This is not Mahomes' fault.
Mm.
We cannot put the burden of winning on him. We cannot put the burden of losing on him." It's the coming back to that body of Christ metaphor again. It's and pastors can be absolutely the worst about it because the sage on the stage thing feeds into this idea that like we carry it all on our backs.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can preach a sermon that knocks it out of the park every single Sunday, but if my community isn't engaged in the work that my sermon is calling them to do, how I understand God to be at work in my words in that moment, then like it doesn't matter.
If we're
You
not
know,
working ourselves out of a job, which I think in the broken metaphor is, if we're not equipping the fans, no, because it's not the fans. The fan is God. If we're not equipping the rest of the team to do the work without the quarterback,
The rookie quarterback that's behind us on the depth chart,
yeah.
that's
right?
What's
Like,
it?
we're all interim ministers in the long run,
Mhm.
right? We're not going to be at a congregation for forever.
Well, we should be. There's a lot of people that think that they are the forever, they're trying to make themselves Brady in New England rather than realizing that it can be Brady anywhere, right? Like,
Called them. They've called dibs, and yeah, they've got.
yeah,
They're ready to retire their number.
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, but there's this understanding that like, I mean that I think goes back into who gets to be a player in the first place, right? Jamie, you started off this entire conversation saying you weren't allowed to play football because you were lanky and whatever, but like if your heart is called to play football, like do we allow you to play football, right?
Mhm.
We don't allow everyone into the space, and that becomes problematic. But my overall arching question, I think, for all of this is, where is competition in the kingdom?
Oh yeah, you do love competition.
I'm a 3. I
Yeah,
freaking love it.
so you're talking
Uh,
to two sevens. So like competition is great till it's boring.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm
Competition's
losing.
wonderful until I win. But also I've had to reevaluate what winning means, right? I mean, like that's the work of growth. There we are on that strong
The aggressive triad, yes.
yeah, aggressive triad in Enneagram. But what my question, I guess, to both of you is: do you see a spot for competition in Jesus's kingdom?
I think we like to build it in inappropriately a lot. Um, and that, continuing our conversation on growth.
I think I think there's it's the Olympic model, not the football model. The Olympic model is it's not in the success, it's in the challenge.
It's kind of in the success. I mean,
You,
someone
you
still
think
gets a
so?
gold medal at the end of the day.
No, but the founder, you know Eddie the Eagle?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with him?
Mhm.
Like it's so. By the way, that man was my sports hero when I was 3.5 years old. I checked in on Eddie the Eagle every single day watching the news. Apparently, I remember none of it, but I was like obsessed with him.
Love it.
Explains a lot. But with Eddie the Eagle, the whole point with it was he legitimately worked towards something. He legitimately worked towards last place, like or he worked towards being there because he wasn't going he towards qualification. It was doing the best that he was capable of doing. And I think iron sharpens iron in that kind of regard. When I'm inspired by preachers, I try to preach as effectively as possible. Like when I see when I did youth ministry exclusively, when I saw good youth ministries, I said, what is it that I can how can I take this and build on it and reframe it or repurpose it? How can we make this work in this context? Is that competition or is that just inspiration?
Can it be both?
Yeah, I guess there's not trophies in ministry. I mean, it's literal trophies that
No, but there are. I mean, we're also coming from a place, in our denomination again, where we kind of go after the churches that we, right. You put your own paperwork into a church that you want. Where there are other spaces where if you're doing good ministry in rural wherever and it's growing and it's by the numbers again, and then your bishop pulls you because you're doing good ministry and puts you into the next step church or whatever, right? Like a bigger church, a more established church, a church where you're gift, so we're
oh,
also coming at this as if the playing field is even and you can kind of move yourself into that, because also there are churches in our denomination that strictly by me being a woman won't even look at me even though I may be the most qualified,
Yeah, no, I still, we build in competition where it's inappropriate. I think that uh, if we ever get to the point where churches can look around and see other local congregations doing incredible work, and our first response is, that's awesome, let's celebrate that, not, oh, we should be doing that too,
Yeah, for sure.
then the church is going to be in a healthy spot.
Mm-hmm.
I think disciples fall into this trap a lot. And I think I said this the last time I was on with you guys when we were talking about the West Wing, is
the weird parallels between football and the West Wing.
There's a lot. But we really, really, really want to be all things to all people, mm-hmm. which means that we end up not being anything to anyone. And if we could just sit there and say, as a church, we are really, really good at these two things. And if you want to be a part of these two things, if you feel like you have gifts and skills to do these two things, we would love for you to be a part of this. But if we're doing A and B and you're really called to C, guess what? There's a church 2 miles away. And they nail C every single day of the week.
In Dallas, we did that.
Yeah.
We joked that there was a tunnel between 4 different congregations.
Mm-hmm. And all of those congregations were super healthy when that was happening.
Yeah. Because it's okay to be good at one thing or two.
And the church is healthier, right? Not just the individual congregation, but it's the entire church is healthier when we can recognize our connectivity between each other, right? Like if Arthur's church right now is a bunch of tight ends and Jamie's church is a bunch of quarterbacks and we're a bunch of coaches or whatever, right? Like we're operating in a much healthier vision of things rather than my church trying to be like, well, we need a bunch of quarterbacks, we need a bunch of tight ends, we need a bunch of the people with the snappers. Like, I don't know.
Centers. I know that one. Centers.
You got a bunch of kickers. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
that's my fantasy football team every year. Just a bunch of kickers.
Listen, a kicker will make or break your team.
By the way, I'm sorry, Jamie, side note, I would like to be in your fantasy league this year. I want no assistance and I just want to go in as an agent of chaos.
Okay.
That sounds fun. I like that too. I support it. I'll be your cheerleader.
Is Flutie still playing or is he like dead?
I don't.
He's closer to death than football. Let's just say that.
But I do want to be cognizant of our time. Jamie, we didn't even listen. I fully came into this conversation prepared to talk about the halftime show.
Let's just say that the memes were the best part of the whole experience.
It's true. And yeah.
The jockstrap dancers. They had jockstraps on their face. You can't convince me otherwise.
Listen, it was football. Isn't that what you guys like, right? That's the whole thing. Anyways, but I do want to be cognizant.
Spiff thinks I like football. I did it, Jamie. I convinced someone.
Man, it took 10 years, but here we are.
Here we are. Jamie, thank you so much for being on and talking football and all of this with us. As is our tradition for the last question, you will get to answer first. So what biblical theme, story, book, character are you most reminded of with the Super Bowl in football writ large, but I would say probably Super Bowl?
I think of a couple different things. Obviously the running the race text is a big one. I think in athletics, just generally, how well do we run our race?
Oh, you mean 1 Corinthians?
Yep.
Ding.
I nailed it. But I also really, especially when it comes to camaraderie and collegiality on a team, I think of Jesus when his family is outside and he's teaching. It's like, hey, Jesus, your mom and your brothers are here. Who are my mother and my brothers? And this idea that our community, there can be extraordinary depth in the relationships that we build with a community or with a team, and the things that we can accomplish together when we recognize each other's gifts and each other's skills and we lift those up. And more often than not, you hear successful sports teams calling themselves a family. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something to that, whether we have a blood family that we love or a chosen family that we love. That kind of connection is so important to the work that we do, to our health as an individual. And I think that's something that Jesus was kind of getting at there is we can expand this space a little bit and start to reframe how we engage and include and talk to one another. And there's significance there, I think.
Amen. Arthur, you want to go? You want me to go?
Elijah and the priests of Baal.
Say more.
I struggled with this question a lot, and that's okay. No, it's Elijah and the priests of Baal. I always think of that as that's the great what is our philosophy and how is this going to work type thing. The priests of Baal are not marching around calling on their god and cutting themselves and everything else because their way is false to them. It's just the different tactics, that understanding. I don't know. I don't have a good answer this week. I guess what I'm going to say is body of Christ, because teams and tight ends, front to butt. Spiff?
Okay, we're gonna need some our
merch. I'm sensing merch.
Yeah, I'm sensing merch too. So because again, when I thought of this, I was very much in the halftime show as someone who was, her undergrad is in performance, and anyways, I went for the halftime show as we were talking about this, and I thought about the Psalms, that there's something about this break to kind of catch your breath, to recenter yourself with some art, some poetry, some music that kind of gives the break for the players, for the heavy work that's happening on either side of it. But not to say that the Psalms don't do their own work. I don't want to say that the halftime performers are just a break. Obviously, we saw, Shakira and J-Lo last year just crush it in performance, and not that the Weeknd didn't do it, but I think there was a different type of performance. But that's the difference in the Psalms as well, that there's different spaces that offer different spaces of rest or inspiration and work and all of that, but that there is a respite in the middle of kind of the more the heavier work that is done on either side, which is the game.
I would like to change my answer.
Okay.
The Bruce Springsteen "Let's Meet in the Middle of Christian Nationalism" commercial was, "You are neither hot nor cold, you are lukewarm, and I spit you from my mouth." Boom, revelation. I like what you had to say, Spiff. The Psalms being diverse and
also, there's a whole episode of 2-on-1 that I want to do on Bruce Springsteen, because you all know that I love
the boss too. That's why I was so disappointed.
I know.
And I want to hear you guys, probably not here because we're running out of time. I want to hear your guys' take on his Jeep commercial from the Super Bowl.
I think that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, he was talking about it. It's awful.
Apple in Kansas.
Yeah, it was bad.
It was garbage.
I generally love all that he does. I think he was trying. I think it missed the mark, and I think it wasn't great.
Well, this has been 2-on-1 with Rev Jamie Plunkett. As we talked everything from Tom Brady not being on the New England Patriots anymore, to fronts to butts, to Bruce Springsteen. I need to share the screen and not just look at it myself. I want you all to see what I'm seeing. That our sponsor today is Jeff Wunrow Design, celebrating 16 years of making ordinary time extraordinary. Check out jeffwunrow.com. It is worth your time and energy to do so.
Use the code 2-on-1, all one word, at checkout for 15% off your entire stole order.
Jamie, I see all those stoles behind you. You look like you could use some more liturgical textiles.
Looks like you could use the Jeff Wunrow stole.
I might have to check it out.
You should. Who do we got coming up, Spiff?
Next week we have Katie Hayes. Sorry,
yes,
I'm gonna have it all written down, but next week we have Reverend Dr. Katie Hayes, who's also preaching at Ministers Week this week. So check her out. And we will be next week with Stephen King. So we're going from the Super Bowl to Stephen King, and
natural progression of things.
It's a natural progression. But excited to talk to Katie and hear all of that. So
we have other stuff in the works and coming up. We're working on releasing our spring lineup sooner than later, because we're running out of people not in the winter. But Jamie, you came on and you talked to us about the Buccaneers and the Chiefs.
Kansas City. Yeah.
Thank you. It's good to see you, my friend.
Thank you all.
It is so good to be with you all. And yeah, Jamie, thank you so much.